Hello. Today I will be presenting on Satanism in the United States and the internalization of the sacred. I chose the title for this project as Evil Backwards Spells Live, not just because it's a cool fun fact, but in an interview with Joe Pine in 1967, Anton LaVey emphasized its illustration of the values of Satanism. Therefore, you take not only this motto of sorts, but the overall beliefs of Satanism, and view them through the theories of Mircea Eliade, their fundamental nature becomes even more explicit. That is why I have chosen to include 5 areas of focus for this presentation. First off, I will begin by giving a brief introduction to the founding of Satanism and its most important literature. Secondly, I will discuss Eliade's theories of the sacred. Thirdly, I will illustrate Eliade's notion of hierophanies and the various examples that can be drawn from both textual as well as personal accounts from the leading members of the Church of Satan. Furthermore, I will illustrate the existence of a cosmic axis within the beliefs of Satanism and how these will finally bring us to my last point of internalization in the individualism that is thus created. Therefore, my working thesis will be this. Through the writings of Eliade, I would argue that the emphasis on the importance of satisfying man's carnal nature is ultimately accomplished through internalizing that which is considered sacred, and that every member of the Church of Satan acts as their own cosmic axis. For a basic introduction to Satanism, the Church of Satan was officially founded in 1966 by this man, Anton LaVey. Then, 3 years later, in 1969, he composed what is known as the Satanic Bible. Within this book, you will find the 9 satanic statements, which I will highlight later in the presentation, as well as 4 books. Number 1, the Book of Satan, the Infernal Diatribe. Number 2, the Book of Lucifer, the Enlightenment. Number 3, the Book of Belial, the Mastery of the Earth. And finally, number 4, the Book of the Leviathan, the Raging Sea. To begin, Eliade defines the sacred as being equivalent to power, and therefore equivalent to reality. Now, I would like to play a short audio clip from the Church of Satan's current high priest, Peter H. Gilmore, in order to give us a sense of the sacred in the eyes of the Church of Satan.
Does the Church of Satan have sins? I mean, there's a lot of, I don't want to say, is it hedonistic? It's, if it feels good, do it. If it tastes good, drink it, kind of, there's a lot of that going on. But is there a moral code that you guys follow?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, we would not say we're hedonistic. We're actually Epicurean, because hedonism implies uncontrolled, rampant, just going wherever you need to go. And that kind of being out of control of your life is something that Satanists oppose. We really feel that we have to be masters of ourselves, and that includes all the pleasures that we're going to be seeking. And the pleasures are one's choices. I think some people think, well, if it's hedonist, then you have to be involved in orgies and gluttony and all these crazy things, and then push yourself in areas that you don't want to go. And the whole point is, for Satanism, since it's a philosophy of individualism, that it's your own choice. You have to decide what's good for you in your life. Now, we do have sins, but our idea of sins, they're behaviors that we want to limit, to get out of our lives. They're things that we find negative, things that we might do. And since we're always about trying to improve ourselves and be the best ourselves that we can be, the satanic sins are a little more interesting than most religions, because they're not something that some god is telling you not to do. These are things that we tell ourselves, hey, we don't really want these to be part of our lives. And the number 1 satanic sin is stupidity.
Now, as we can gather from this audio clip, the nature of the sacred is strongly rooted in the individual's conscious decision to fulfill their everyday lives, and ensuring that each decision is centered around satisfying personal desires. Now, with Eliade's definition of the sacred, it's clear that these daily choices are ultimately sacred and continually work to create the individual's reality. Therefore, given these examples of the sacred, I would argue that an adherent to Satanism manifests these sacred qualities within the individual self, for they are in charge of the agency that ensures their own reality. For even within the Satanic Bible, there is a direct reference to the nobility of thought and action, these two being of the utmost importance because they are the modes of agency which the sacred can manifest itself. Hence, the title of this slide is not called Sacred and the Profane per se, but this is to further instill the notion that within Satanism, the profane is not acting to your full potential, thus denying yourself true fulfillment. Hence why Peter Gilbert referenced stupidity as a sin as true profanity, because in that case, one is not fulfilling their abilities of thought and action, ultimately denying themselves their own power, and therefore an actualized reality. And to further understand this concept of hierophanies, I would like to offer another example within the Church of Satan, and a scholar who defines the nuances of Iliad's approach, Randall Studstill. In the Book of Lucifer, founder Anton LaVey specified that the highest of all holidays is one's own birthday. This seen through the lens of Iliad exemplifies the phenomena that is the creation of individual hierophanies. For every member is their own manifestation of the sacred. And if we take it a step further, having this event grounded in a precise historical moment, with a clear emphasis on the celebration of one's own existence, and therefore the presence of a hierophany, we can see that the dogma of the Church of Satan further embodies Randall Studstill's theory of Iliad's hierophanies, which is as follows. For Iliad, the hierophany is any manifestation of the sacred, and as such, has two elements: the modality of the sacred, and the expression of that modality as a concrete historical phenomena. In the sense that within each hierophany, there exists the modality of the sacred, and the expression of that modality as a concrete historical phenomenon. The modality in this case being the expression through the fulfillment and preservation of oneself, and the concrete historicity of it as being celebrated at the yearly commemoration of oneself. Now this gives us a deeper illustration of the notion of hierophanies, for it places it within a more nuanced context of personal reality, previously mentioned by Iliad in his theory about that which is sacred. Now I would like to play another segment from the same audio clip, which illustrates the phenomena that there are similarities between atheism and humanism with Satanism, and the notion that Gilmore describes that atheism and humanism seem to be almost there.
Is a hell of a good time. We think that actually a lot of folks who just want to be atheists and humanists get a little lost because they don't look at the human animal and really may see that these are aspects that are something that could be exercised to the benefit of the person rather than just be put aside. I remember that if you looked at American atheists under Madalyn Murray O'Hair, they were constantly trying to invent symbols for themselves and coming up with replacement rituals and such, because people kind of felt bereft, I think, not having anything that they could do that they could use to reinforce their own values. Ayn Rand talked about consciousness being conceptual, and that you'd create metaphors out of a lot of percepts, you'd build up larger concepts, and that kind of idea that a symbol brings together so many different concepts all at one time. Symbolism is very powerful for the human animal.
Now, in Gilmore's description, we see that by disavowing a relation with God, one becomes closer to fulfilling the desires of the self. This ability to seemingly be on track or on the stepping stones to Satanism, I would argue, illustrates that there are manifestations of the sacred that are ranked, whether knowingly or not. Now, given that Iliad defines a hierophany as a manifestation of the sacred, I would argue that there are successively more significant gestures one can perform in the eyes of the Church of Satan. For example, one can become an atheist or a humanist and dispatch the notion of an otherworldly being in an afterlife, and one can also occasionally act upon self-indulgent desires, which I argue are all hierophanies. However, if we apply this notion of a progressional view of hierophanies, put forth by Stephen J. Reno, we begin to see a similar pattern form in this example of Satanism. Therefore, not only can Satanism be seen through the explicit theories of Eliade, but we can also see parallel examples to nuanced and further complicated interpretations of his theories as well. Now to return to Eliade's direct theory of hierophanies. In his description, Eliade emphasizes that they are the manifestation of something wholly different order, of a reality that does not belong to our world, in objects that are an integral part of our natural profane world, as well as, by manifesting the sacred, any object becomes something else, yet it continues to remain itself, for it continues to participate in its surrounding cosmic milieu. Now when we take these arguments, it becomes more apparent that hierophanies serve as fundamental figures that must themselves operate as an entity constantly surrounded by the profane. With this consideration, and using Satanism as the example, I further argue that the belief that the sacred is rooted in one's power over their life, and the fact that they should be living by the fulfillment of their own desires through their thoughts and actions. However, while this example highlights the existence of hierophanies within Satanism, I would like to take it another step by highlighting that Eliade also emphasized that but since religious man cannot live except in an atmosphere impregnated with the sacred, we must expect to find a large number of techniques for consecrating space, as a means for defining the prevalence of the notion of a cosmic axis, or axis mundi, within religions. Now the question I would like to answer is whether this technique of consecration is exemplified within the Church of Satan. And the answer is a very big yes. Now it's not just an ordinary yes, because I argue that within Satanism, Eliade's notion of the cosmic axis is personified through each individual adherent, exemplifying Eliade's claim that the religious man would find a large number of techniques for consecrating everywhere one goes. They are constantly consecrating the space they inhabit by fulfilling their personal desires. And this concept then ties into a direct quote from the Satanic Bible, which states, "The strongest instinct in every living thing is self-preservation." Now, these two are related in the sense that in order to continually impregnate one's space and consecrate it with the sacred, it is important for Satanism to maintain one's self by any means necessary, because by doing so, they are therefore maintaining the sacred and their own cosmic axis. Therefore, in this case, self-preservation is the preservation of a cosmic axis. Now, Eliade defines a cosmic axis as conveying the central axis for all future orientation, as well as highlighting that there is also revelation of an absolute reality, opposed to the non-reality of the vast surrounding expanse. The manifestation of the sacred ontologically founds the world. Now, when we look at Satanism, the belief that the individual is in control of their thoughts and actions, and that by fulfilling their personal desires, they embody that which is sacred. Therefore, I believe that in the Church of Satan, the individual represents their own cosmic axis. for they are each the axis by which they are to orient their present and their future. Even if their desires change, it is a notion that you are constantly employing self-gratification that serves as your personal orientation. Furthermore, as I will demonstrate in the next slide, the idea that there is an absolute reality is central to the Church of Satan's argument for the utter sacredness that lies within satisfying one's desires during their lifetime. Now, what I have before you are the 9 satanic statements created by Anton LaVey, and they are instrumental to understanding the beliefs of Satanism, and 2 in particular fully embody the notion that an individual serves as their own cosmic axis. The first statement I would like to highlight is number 2, that Satan represents vital existence instead of pipe dreams. While this may seem a little different worded when compared to other religions' doctrines, the fundamentality of the message remains evident. The inclusion of the term pipe dreams, in this case, is ultimately in reference to the belief in the existence of an afterlife in any context. The idea that one cannot rely on gratification in anything that may occur after death, but instead must rely on the present life or vital existence. This specific statement illustrates one of the notions of Eliad's cosmic axis definition, for it exemplifies the need for grounding and a belief in an absolute reality. And then when combined with the 8th statement, that Satan represents all of the so-called sins as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification, serves to embody Eliad's notion for its role in one's future orientation. However, given that this existence is linked to the gratification of self, I believe that these 2 examples further illustrate that the individual serves as his or her own cosmic axis, for the absolute reality that they are centered around is the indulgence of personal desires in the life that they are currently living. Now, in these following 3 clips, Peter H. Gilmore, as well as Anton LaVey, will speak their thoughts on what Satanism is, and through their testimony, it is clear that Satanism is centered around the individual's ability to serve as their own cosmic axis, and therefore internalize the sacred.
The church operates out of New York in Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, obvious, and the high priest is Peter Gilmore. So Peter, let's break it right down, some of the myths of the Church of Satan. You don't actually believe in Satan, do you?
Right, we're not devil worshippers, we're Satanists. We start off being atheists and then decide that we are our own gods, the center of the universe. And so Satan for us is a symbol of freedom, liberty, and pride, which we think is a wonderful thing.
As bizarre as many religions would seem to an outsider, you recognize that religion does provide meaning to people's lives. Certain people take a lot of meaning from it. What does the Church of Satan provide people in the form of meaning?
Well, for us, meaning is something that you have to give existence because we think the universe is indifferent to us. There's no God, there's no devil, there's no afterlife. So you have to take control of your own life and decide what is going to have meaning for you. So Satanism is a tool for our members to get the most out of life.
We're taught from childhood not to do certain things. Any attempt to sort of scrape the psyche clean is only going to make us much more, and certainly much more fraught with frustrations and tensions. So what we've done is just reverse the procedure. Instead of trying to free ourselves, we've taken all these hang-ups, we've turned them into useful situations.
Now, in both Gilmore and LaVey's accounts, they both reference the idea of taking a familiar concept and internalizing it in order to make it so that the individual person has quite literally taken it upon themselves to be essentially judge, jury, and executioner. In the sense that a question may arise as to whether an individual will act on an impulse or desire, it is then up to them to decide what route would best benefit them, and then finally produce a decision in the form of action. These clips therefore directly highlight a Satanist's role as their own axis mundi, or cosmic axis, but it also emphasizes a strong sense of individualism. As illustrated previously, members of the Church of Satan emphasize the sacred nature of acting upon one's personal agency and indulgence in one's own desires. And when looking at the various characteristics in Scripture supported by the Church of Satan, with an eye towards the theories of Eliade, it becomes evident that not only do these actions act as sacred manifestations, but when viewing the role of each individual, it becomes clear that each member of the Church of Satan functions as their own cosmic axis, consecrating the space they occupy in whatever way they feel is fitting. Now, we must not forget that while the individuals associated with this church have internalized that which Eliade defined as sacred and operate as their own method of orientation, the Church of Satan is still comprised of a community, but a community of individualists. For my last example, I have a screenshot from the Church of Satan's official website, following the link labeled 9 Satanic Sins. The sin I am most interested for now is number 5, herd conformity, through which it is highlighted again the importance of personal agency. However, what I found to be especially interesting was the phrase, choose a master wisely. This, I would argue, is especially important in the formation of a community of individuals who already embody the sacred beliefs for which they will orient their lives. For this clause is still expressing the individual's right to choose someone, if anyone at that, so they've not altered their sacred state to conform to someone else's wishes, but instead, this relationship fosters a community that understands their independent centrality, but at the same time, welcomes relationships they have each personally deemed important for the betterment of themselves, therefore further gratifying their lives and strengthening the internalization of the sacred. Now to conclude. Through the writings and theories of Eliade, as well as the different arguments put forth in the scholarly articles by Studstill and Reno, I have found that Satanism viewed through the concept of hierophany, cosmic axis, and the sacred and the profane, have emphasized a strong internalization of sacred beliefs and manifestations, therefore resulting in the creation of a community of people who act as their own personal cosmic axes. Thank you.